I can get started. Do we call a roll first? I guess. Please call a roll. Thank you.
Dr. Bopey? Here. Dr. Bopey is present. Mr. Castile?
Here.
Mr. Castile is present. Dr. Davis?
Here.
Dr. Davis is present. Ms. Ellis?
Here.
Ms. Ellis is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Holloway?
Here.
Ms. Holloway is present. Mr. Mallory? Mr. Mallory is not present. Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Morris is present. Ms. Orange Jones? Ms. Orange Jones is not present. Mr. Rock? Mr. Rock is present. Ms. Boucher? Here. Ms. Boucher is present. We have a quorum.
Yes. Yes, we do. There's Ms. Doreen, can you take the roll, please?
Sure. Blake Gobby,
Here.
Randy Ewing, Stephanie Finley, Robert Levy, Katarina Logrove,
Here.
Philip May, Charles McDonald,
Here.
Darren Meir, Sonia Perez, Wilbur Pryor, Jay Seal,
Here.
Gary Solomon,
Here.
Terry Sterling,
Here.
Hollis Temple,
Here.
Felix Wild,
Here.
Judy Williams Brown.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I have our first item called, please?
Thank you.
Your first item is the approval of the minutes from December 15th, 2021.
We have a motion to approve.
So
Approved. Second by Ms. Holloway. Do you have any questions or comments? Do we have any cards put in? No. Okay. Do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Oh, we do? Okay. That's enough for this item. Get this prepared for the items that you correspond to. No cards on this particular item. Do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 4.1, consideration of an update report regarding broadband development and connectivity.
We get a motion for this item, please. A motion to hear the report. Ms. Holloway. Give me a second, Ms. Ellis. Thank you. Okay. Who is presenting this?
So good morning. My name is Glenn Howie. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for the Office of Broadband Development and Connectivity. I want to thank both boards for giving me the opportunity to provide an update from our office. Beneath is going to be here this morning. His flight was canceled from Charlotte last night, so I'm subbing in for him today and we'll present. So anytime we present anywhere, whether it's in this room or on the road, in East Carroll Parish or down in Plaquemines, we always reiterate that the governor's mandate and our office's vision is to eliminate the digital divide by 2029, period. So briefly, I want to give an update on our 3 pillars of broadband: infrastructure, affordability, and digital literacy. On the infrastructure piece, the $342 million Rural Digital Opportunity Fund program is ongoing. That is an SEC program. The vast majority of the locations in the state have been fully authorized. So we look forward to those build-outs. Now, those companies do have to build out their infrastructure over a period of 6 years. The clock has started ticking on those companies, and they are required by the federal government to build out to 40% of those locations statewide by year 3. So you should see some ribbon cuttings and some announcements coming shortly in that program. When we come to a grant program, we will have an update slide next. And then lastly, sort of the bigger announcements, I guess, for this morning will be on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Previously, as you can see on the slide, we had pegged that number that we would receive at a minimum of $100 million. We can confidently say and report today that we will receive in excess of $1 billion for broadband infrastructure relative to that program. On affordability, this slide is a little dated as well. As of this morning, in Louisiana, we have 281,000 households that have enrolled in the Affordable Connectivity Program. That is a program through the federal government that allows a $30 discount on monthly internet broadband bills to households that are eligible, and there are some eligibility criteria that are relevant to this organization, and we can touch on that shortly. And then lastly, on the digital literacy piece, again, we always reiterate the statistic with some internal analysis. We estimate that the working age group between 18 and 64 in the state of Louisiana, we have about 462,000 individuals in that working age group that our office would consider as not having basic digital literacy skills, and we know that that's going to be a very important piece for both boards as we move forward. So some brief updates. Again, we executed round 1 of the Enrollment Grant Program earlier this year. Those applications have been evaluated. We've gone through the protest process for those applications. We're currently in the appeal phase. 177 total applications. About half were protested. Of those, about 34 were appealed to Commissioner Gordon, and those decisions are being released as we speak. There were some released on Monday. We will have some additional decisions that are released over the next couple of weeks. We had 2 legislative instruments pass successfully in the regular session. SB 455 was an instrument by Senator Boudreaux, and that establishes a statewide map. So we will know, on a statewide perspective, every single location in the state, whether it has broadband access or not, and that will help to dictate how we move infrastructure grants moving forward, and should sort of tone down some of the protest issues that we had in round 1. HB 1080 by Representative Dovertel was sort of a gumbo cleanup bill. We did learn a lot, and we're going to be able to improve the process moving forward. So 1080 made some revisions to gumbo that we will be able to enact moving forward the rules and sort of tighten that program just a little bit. On May 13th, the rules and guidance around the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, particularly BESE, Digital Equity and Middle Mile grant programs are released. And as I said just a second ago, we are expecting to receive in excess of $1 billion specific to infrastructure, and we're highly confident that we'll be able to connect every home and business in the state. So from now to the end of the year, we're going to have intense stakeholder engagement for round 2 of GOMBO, get the word out, talk to the parishes that need additional work, and work hand in hand with all the stakeholders. We are working on, as I stated in SB 455, that's the mapping bill. Our plan currently is to wait until that map is complete to launch round 2. We think it's going to be better for us overall. It's going to limit the protest issues that we have moving forward. So we're going to likely see round 2 of GOMBO later in the year. And then lastly, we should receive our first tranche of IGP money, a portion of that $1 billion fund this time next year. So with that, I just wanted to highlight a couple of other things where Regents and BESE have been very critical of what we've done. Currently, for the Regents, we are working, coordinated with you to work on a digital literacy pilot program in 5 parishes across the state. I don't know the exact parishes by heart at the moment. I believe there are 2 north of the 1012 corridor and 3 parishes below the 1012 corridor. But essentially, we've worked with Regents and BESE, I believe, to institute this digital literacy effort. It's going to be housed at local libraries in the 5 parishes. And the goal overall will be that once those pilot projects are successful, we move the program statewide, and the goal is to eliminate or reduce actually the digital illiteracy rate in Louisiana by 50% over 5 years. Additionally, on the Affordable Connectivity Program, one of the criteria as relative to Board of Regents would be any student in higher ed in the state of Louisiana that receives a Pell Grant is eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program, which would give them a $30 discount each month. Lastly, for K-12, you have also been very integral in what we've been doing as we've been out on the road, talking with stakeholders and community engagement. Superintendents have always been invited. They've been with us every step of the way. They've informed our program development, and they've been very active, and I thank you for that. And lastly, an additional ACP program eligibility metric is any student in the state of Louisiana who receives free days lunch is eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program. There are some parishes that have statewide, parish-wide free lunch. So every student in those households would be eligible for the program, and the other student in other parishes that do not have a parish-wide free lunch but qualify as a household would also be eligible. And I think the fact that we are number 1 in the country in that program relative to eligible households speaks to the work that these boards have done and our educators across the state have done. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Mr. Castillo.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for filling in for Philippe. I'm sure he appreciates it. On slide 2 of your deck, you talk about the lack of basic digital literacy skills as being approximately 462,000.
That's correct.
Do we know the number of residents that are just not connected, that don't have access or?
Yeah, so that's going to be a much larger number. If you look at issues, that would be a lack of infrastructure, so they can't get it if they want it, okay? 2, it's there, but they can't afford it. 3, the literacy issue, they're not subscribed because they don't feel like they can improve their lives, they don't have to use it properly. Or 4, they don't have a functioning device that can get to it. McKinsey would estimate that about 1.5 million residents in the state do not use broadband for one of those 4 reasons. So either infrastructure, affordability, literacy, or device issue. So about 1.5 million overall.
And of those residents, do you have a sense of how many of those are K-12 students, families?
That is a very good question. I don't have that specific back in mind at the moment, but I can definitely do some research and get back to you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Mr. Morris?
Yes, sir. On the K-12 conversation, there's a lot of where you consider student access in a household with a couple of brothers and sisters and working mom and dad, whatever, and everybody wants to be on the internet at the same time. Not only is connectivity an issue, or a concern, but the speed of connectivity is an issue as well. So money doesn't seem to be an issue in this conversation, but I'm interested in, with all this investment, what speed of connectivity should students expect going forward?
Yeah, so the current version 1 of Combo, we, as a requirement of federal dollars, it is a 100 by 100 symmetrical requirement. Now, there are some exceptions for 100 by 20. If there is for excessive cost to deploy or difficult geography or topography, you can have a project that will deploy 100 by 20. But in the current version 1 and moving forward, it will be a 100 by 100 requirement. Absolutely.
One more question real quick.
Yes, sir.
So by 2029, and hopefully earlier, do you see any obstacle right now why any student in the state would not have adequate access?
So, if you look at it, we, as an office and as a state, have a requirement to the federal government as a recipient of the infrastructure dollars to certify that every single household and business in the state has access to broadband. Now, there are other mitigating factors. Affordability is going to be an important piece to know. And for a lot of people, $50 a month is a big deal, right? And so, that's an issue. That's why we're trying to push as much as we can affordability programs. We're looking at some additional affordability steps that we can do with the money that we're going to receive. We actually think there's a high possibility that we may have extra dollars after we connect every home business in the state. And one of the priorities, if we can do, well, once we do that, moving forward with extra dollars, one of the priorities we will have is affordability. So we're looking at a creation of an affordability trust fund, and also trying to get prices as low as possible. In the current version of Nimbo, providers were incentivized to have their packages priced as low as possible. So to us, we think, aside from predicting, affordability is going to be a big issue. We're working very hard to counter that.
Sorry, one more. With all the funds that you've identified, what happens if you don't spend them all in a certain time? You have a return on the funds not spent by a certain date, and if so, what is that date?
So we would anticipate spending the full allotment of whatever we receive. We do have a commitment for the current number program that's funded through a treasury program called the Capital Projects Fund. We have to expend all those dollars by the end of 2024. I think there's an extension we can have until the end of 2026. But we can get specifics for you in each program and let you know specifically if we don't spend by a certain deadline, what would occur, we can get that to you.
I'd like to know if we have to return the funds or not if we don't spend by a certain deadline.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Castillo?
Just a follow-up question, and this is to Dr. Reed and Dr. Brumley. In light of this increased access to broadband, I know in the last 2.5 years, my law school classes have all been online. So my students have literally been across the country participating with really no glitches. As we think about this additional access, what is it that your respective K-12 higher education. What are you thinking about in terms of how does the delivery of education look different in the next several years to come?
Good morning, thank you for that question. Obviously, the pandemic was a game changer in terms of remote education. At the moment, as you know, we did the best we could to just keep education moving forward. Now we have the opportunity to really lean into how do we get a much more high-quality remote product for students, and I think hybrid education is here to stay. I think you'll see pre-pandemic, we saw flipped classrooms in higher education where students would watch or read materials in advance and then come to the class for the conversation and the discussion. I think we will see much more of that sort of hybrid discussion and hybrid production of content for students. I do think that the comments that were made about affordability are critical. You know, it's going to be great. That's Member Morris, that we have every community connected, but just because the wires run to your house does not mean that you are participating in digital literacy or digital competency. So we're thinking about working with the Broadband office on a digital equity plan for the state of Louisiana to move us from access to technology to infusion of technology in the households, enrichment of technology. And what does that mean for every discipline? How do we think about e-commerce, e-health, telework, improved education, just the full range of what's the potential of technology. So those are sort of next horizon issues that we're thinking about in addition to affordable access, access to hardware, etc.
Mr. Castillo, you are very aware of the student learning outcomes between kids who were fully virtual versus kids who were fully face-to-face. And I would suspect that if that were to happen again at this point, those results would not be as wide just because of many of the learnings around digital education and how to provide virtual instruction that have vastly improved. But for us, and the overwhelming number of our kids, day-to-day face-to-face instruction we think is best. But at the same time, we can't run from technology. We have to embrace it. We have to find ways that can help us solve many of our challenges that we face. For me, what I'm thinking about is, are there opportunities through technology now to ensure that children have access to high-quality teachers? We know that we face a staffing issue across the state in our classrooms, and I think there could be opportunities there, particularly in rural communities, where we can ensure that kids have access to high-quality teachers. The second thing I think that's also important and an opportunity is, will this allow us to be able to more effectively deliver tutoring services, high-dosage tutoring to students in the evenings, during the summer. We're doing a lot of work, as you well know, around tutoring, and this will provide additional opportunities, I believe, to deliver those services. But those are just a couple of things that, as Dr. Reed said, we have to be willing to embrace any strong idea that will be helpful in solving the needs that we face within our society.
Dr. Reed, I'll share that. I taught about 5 classes during the pandemic at the Southern University Law Center. Trial advocacy, which is a skills course that normally requires lots of interaction. It's very concerning that would not go over very well via Zoom. On the other hand, actually it turned out great. And it was great also because, as the lawyers will attest, that the court systems went virtual as well, and we ended up making appearances, trying cases via Zoom, virtual. And so the training that the law school students were getting really was real world experience as we were pivoting in the pandemic. And Dr. Brumley, you spoke to my education law class. It was very easy with students. Students were I had a student in Washington, D.C. who was participating in an internship program while also taking classes full-time at the law school because he was able to participate virtually. The schools that I lead, K-12 schools on the other hand, like Dr. Brumley said, the experience was not as great. So I know personally I found that younger students have greater difficulty, as Dr. Brumley pointed out, but we have an opportunity. So I'm looking forward, hope we never have to do this again, but to the point of some opportunities have been created as a result of the pandemic. Certainly, I found at the higher ed level, K-12 is still a work in progress, but I'm looking forward to what happens in the future as you folks move along, what we can do. Thank you.
Yeah, may I belabor that for a moment?
Oh, please do. Please do. This is an exciting topic.
Just a point to Mr. Castile, I think what we find too is, as you mentioned, the older the learner, the greater the opportunity for success, because as we run into very young learners, they also require supervision, which may or may not have access to that because the family may have to be at work. Whereas your law school students are desiring to be in the program, paying for the program, know that they have to be successful in the program, which is a little bit different than a 6-year-old who just may not want to go to school. And so those are also issues that we have to try to figure out as well.
I was just telling Regent Dottie that students, they caught onto breakout rooms where they would divide up into small groups using Zoom. It was just absolutely fabulous. But again, to your point, very motivated students who were as comfortable with the technology as I was.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. Do we have any, we have a motion on the floor to receive this report? Okay, do we have any objections to that motion? Hearing none, that motion carries. Next item.
Next item is 4.2, consideration of an update report regarding dual enrollment.
Adam Lowe. I'm sorry, I can't see your name tag.
Quite okay. Melinda Baker, good morning.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, members of BESE and Board of Regents. My name is Melinda Baker. I serve as the Assistant Commissioner of Strategic Planning and Student Success at the Board of Regents. I have the privilege of working with several other Board of Regents staff members in supporting the work of the Dual Enrollment Task Force. And so today we're going to be highlighting a few of those key initiatives related to dual enrollment in Louisiana. As a reminder, dual enrollment is when that high school student is taking that college course while in high school. Dual enrollment includes both academic as well as technical courses. About a quarter of the dual enrollment courses in Louisiana are those career and technical courses, while the remaining 75% are those general education courses. And so before you have a handout. This was included in your materials this month as well as in December, and it provides an update on the work of the legislatively created dual enrollment task force. In February of 2020, this task force put forth its first set of recommendations, and it charged BESE, Department of Education, as well as Board of Regents, several priority actions that are needed to happen in order to scale dual enrollment in Louisiana. And so several of those action items, as you can see on the handout, have been accomplished, and several are underway. This morning I'm going to highlight a few of those that have been undertaken in this past year. And so to begin, LADualEnrollment.com was launched in January of 2022. This website was created as a one-stop shop for information related to dual enrollment. It came from the feedback of the task force to streamline information for dual enrollment. It includes a searchable course page, dynamic frequently asked questions, and it also has information related to each post-secondary institution's dual enrollment coordinator. Since launching the website, we've had over 25,000 hits, and we've also received positive feedback over this website being user-friendly, easy to navigate, and a well-needed resource for the state. And so since another priority item, we launched the first dual enrollment report. We'll continue to come forward with this report, which is us tracking dual enrollment participation in the state. The next report will come to you in December of 2022 and will include multiple academic years. Towards the end of this presentation, Adam Lowe will give you some of the preliminary analysis that will be found in this report. Next, again, leaning into the recommendations of the task force, we are going to be offering some workshop series. Specifically, we've partnered with NACEP, which is the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships, to offer statewide workshops, both in person as well as online through webinars. NACEP assists colleges in implementing quality practices, and we're going to be facilitating this workshop series with a focus on rigor and continuous project improvement. We held our first webinar in April. We had over 150 attendees at that, and we held our first in-person workshop in May, and we had over 100 attendees. And we really look forward to the next webinar, which will be held on June 23rd. All are welcome to attend, and then we'll have additional in-person workshops over the summer. And so to speak more about the common expectations related to dual enrollment, I will ask Adam Lowe to share a few points with you. Adam Lowe has supported the work of the Dual Enrollment Task Force since its creation, and he also serves as the founding director of Saffron Ventures Consulting. So Adam, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you very much, Melinda, and thank you, President Garvey and Chair Temple, for your continued interest in the progress that Louisiana has made on expanding access to quality dual enrollment programming. As Melinda mentioned, I'm a consultant. I've been working with the Regents and with the Dual Enrollment Task Force and the department staff over the past 3 years around dual enrollment alignment of the two systems. The leadership that your joint boards has provided in this area and coordinating across the two sectors is vital and certainly something of very strong practice that Louisiana has that I've not seen as effectively implemented in other states that I've worked with around the country. It's nice to be back with you again. I was here last year and shared with you that the initial dual enrollment data report that we prepared last year. Given that dual enrollment lives at the intersection of the K-12 and higher education systems, I wanted to share with you that the frameworks under which the colleges and universities who operate their dual enrollment programs and how they manage the academic oversight of those programs. At the post-secondary level, regular full-time faculty and academic leadership at each college and university have the primary responsibility for curriculum and assessment of student learning. Institutions are expected to ensure the academic integrity of that course regardless of where it's taught, regardless of the delivery method, regardless of the instructor of that course, and regardless of the students who are sitting in that course. Regents Academic Affairs Policy 2.2 extends that principle specifically to dual enrollment and provides a framework for how the colleges apply this in teaching college courses to high school students. Further, each institution is accountable to their regional institutional accreditor, Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, Commission on Colleges, which has a policy statement specifically addressing dual enrollment given their significant emphasis on the topic over the last decade. Ask any college that has recently gone through a reaffirmation or a substantive change, and they will undoubtedly hear questions about how that review addressed and how those accreditation site visitors addressed dual enrollment. So what does this mean in practice, however? How do colleges achieve consistency in the rigor of dual enrollment curriculum content and assessment of student learning? Most colleges have master course syllabi or another document where each course's learning outcomes are written. Those learning outcomes and objectives remain the same for each course, particularly those entry-level college courses, whether that course is taught on campus, online, or in a high school setting for dual enrollment. Colleges that offer dual enrollment provide those master syllabi and review them with dual enrollment instructors during onboarding. This is a requirement of Regent policy that instructors receive formal training in the delivery of that course. Faculty, department chairs, and academic deans approve the syllabi for new instructors before their first class and typically periodically review them for veteran instructors as well. Student performance in a course is measured against required learning objectives. Thus, the assessment of student learning should be done using comparable grading standards and assessment methods for on-campus sections as with dual enrollment section. For example, a math class might have a required midterm or a final with the same questions or selected from a question bank. A science class might have a certain number of lab assignments on defined topics. A large part of a welding student's grade will typically depend on her successful performance on a welding task that meet industry standards. A history class might use the same paper topic with a rubric for assessing the components of that grade. There are many ways in which faculty ensure assessment alignment in delivering these courses in a distributed manner by multiple instructors. So again, it's the responsibility of campus faculty to ensure this alignment and both of the curriculum and the assessment used in all sections of the courses that they deliver, and to ensure that they're comparable across the So I wanted to turn now to presenting for you some of the preliminary data around dual enrollment participation and trends. In particular, to help you understand some of the early impacts that we're seeing from the pandemic, as well as hurricane disruptions, and the ways in which your policies from the two boards have helped minimize the impacts that we've seen from those disruptions. This is a first glance at the data, and we are preparing a full data report that will be available to you by your December meeting. At your joint meeting in December of 2019, these two boards adopted a joint statement that you see on the left side of this slide. A desire for every high school student to graduate with some form of early college credit, whether through dual enrollment, advanced placement, international baccalaureate tests, or a credential of value in a technical field, or both. This vision that you set continues to guide policy and practice by the department, by Regents, and schools and colleges across the state as they drive towards this goalpost. What you see here is a representation of the most recent high school classes for which the department has graduation data, including the class of 2020 that graduated at the start of the COVID pandemic. The blue students at the top started in 9th grade 4 years earlier, but did not graduate with their class 4 years later. Some of them certainly did graduate in a 5th year, but the department measures on-time graduation for this metric. You will notice that there was a 4% increase in high school graduation rate, largely resulting from BESE waiving the testing requirements for LEAP 2025 and other ways of providing flexibility for students to graduate during the disruption of the early days of the pandemic. Those of you on BESE have recently discussed the impact of these waivers, which extended for 1 additional year, so we'll see that impact on the student data for 2021 school year as well. The orange students represent the total number of high school graduates who earned college credit or an industry-based credential, and that was nearly the same across the 2 years, with about 27,000 students representing that. Half of those students earned college credit through dual enrollment courses. It's the largest program by which students earn college credit. The count does currently include many students who earn only basic industry-based credentials. Regents, the department, and the Workforce Commission are working to identify more advanced credentials of value and to incentivize students to continue to pursue those more advanced credentials, not just the basic ones. To achieve the overall goal for the class of 2029, those students who are entering 6th grade this fall, a continued focus on closing the equity gaps will be critical to hitting that goal. So we're able to start seeing some of the preliminary data for the pandemic years. When I presented to you last year, I had informed you that the 2018-19 school year was the first year that Regents' stricter standards for student eligibility for general education dual enrollment coursework had come into effect. That year there had been an 8% decline in dual enrollment from the prior year. That decline continued with a small drop in 2019-20, whether you measure by the number of students, enrollments, or credit hours. But we did see those numbers pick back up in 2021. Much of this growth may be due to increased flexibility that Regents provided during the pandemic for institutions to use multiple measures to place students into those general education courses, as well as the growth in the availability of online and hybrid courses. And so as Dr. Brumley mentioned earlier, building back stronger the lessons from the pandemic, one of them may be the increased availability of hybrid coursework for students in those rural areas. Now, these overall trends do mask some fairly significant variation, which we are still delving into and just beginning to understand some of the dynamics of. The full report will go further on this, but our preliminary analysis shows a 23% decline in course enrollments in career and technical education fields. In particular, large declines were seen in the numbers of students participating in those hands-on career coursework that were difficult to shift online, or required in-person clinical or lab hours where there were restrictions on in-person gatherings, including areas such as health professions, welding, and culinary programs. We'll soon be looking at data from this recent year to see how much these programs have bounced back and rebuilt in the 2021-22 school year. Our goal certainly is to continue to strengthen those programs and build them back stronger. And not surprisingly, what we did see during the 2021-22 school year was a significant growth in the number of students doing fully online or hybrid coursework. It doubled the number of enrollments from the prior school year. There you go. The degree to which those are going to be lasting changes remains to be seen, but certainly the availability of online and hybrid coursework has been extended to areas that previously was not available. On the right, you'll see some of the ways in which Regents tried to ameliorate the impacts of the pandemic in spring 2020 specifically. Regents' emergency policy adopted in spring 2020 enabled institutions and encouraged institutions to provide more flexibility for students who were significantly disrupted in that spring. It allowed them to do administrative withdrawals so that a student wouldn't even generate a transcript if the course had been fully disrupted, as well as allowed greater use of incompletes or in progress to enable students to work over the summer to complete a course that had been disrupted. And so again, the data is showing that students did take advantage of those opportunities during the initial days of the pandemic. So in closing, I look forward to sharing with you more detailed data as we continue the analysis over the summer and into this fall and deliver you the complete report. Before we open up for questions, I would like to call on Dr. Reed, who serves as co-chair of the Dual Enrollment Task Force, to speak to you about some of the work that's going on.
Thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate the report. Certainly appreciate the joint focus of Regents and BESE on how to make sure that more of our students across the state of Louisiana have access to early college opportunities in high school. This is vital as we continue to work to meet the goal, the joint goal that BESE and Regents have set for every high school student in the class by the class of 2029 to graduate with a college credit or credential or both. We want students to understand, parents, communities, that the high school diploma is the floor, not the ceiling, when it comes to talent development in our state. And we believe an early start, a strong start, a rigorous start is important for those students. So I would say that in terms of the information, obviously we are pleased to see a significant increase, a little increase rather in the high school class of students who are graduating with a college credit or credential. Certainly not at 100%, about half of them, so we have more work to do there. I really collectively believe that the work we must continue to align the work in terms of policy, resource, and certainly the accountability system to accelerate dual enrollment and other opportunities for students. That is going to be very important to moving this work forward. Despite the pandemic, we're happy to see students continuing to avail themselves of this, staying on track, even though it was harder than ever to do so. I certainly appreciate the fact that we are continuing to focus on rigor and quality to make sure that faculty, high school students are continuing to receive first-rate coursework that prepares them and launches them well into higher education, and that we're working on transferability of those courses. So when moms ask us, is the course going to transfer when my student moves from this high school to a college or university in Louisiana, so that we can say, yes, it will. And so there's legislation that was passed to improve universal transfer. And then finally, I will say, I'm happy to see the emergency policies are working. We work collectively to try to make sure, if we're going to focus on equity and access, equity of opportunity, we have to ask the question, how are students doing, but also which students are not participating. And so having the counselor letter of recommendation to say that a student would benefit, we see that it looks like it's really paying off for students. The Board of Regents extended that emergency eligibility for 3 years to allow us to do further research on how that is working. And so I'm very happy to see that. The challenge, and there are many, one of those obviously is career technical education. We were not at the numbers we needed to be pre-pandemic. You've heard the information about the further decline. And so we do have to continue to send the word that dual enrollment is for everyone, whether you're interested in an academic course or a career technical education course. And so how we do that collectively, I think, is going to be very important. So with that, I'll turn it over to my partner, Dr. Bromley, and thank you for the continued commitment. I certainly want to thank Doris Boucher, who sits on the Dual Enrollment Task Force. We've been at this since 2019, chipping away at this work, and I think good policy is happening because people are committed to change and improvement for students.
So I just wanted to highlight 2 things. First, individuals in the room today that are on the dual enrollment task force, no Superintendent Boucher, but also we have other members who are on that task force. Just want to say thank you to them for their many hours of volunteer effort to try to move this work forward. So I appreciate them as well as Commissioner Reed chairing that committee. The second thing I wanted to mention is just the importance of the Articulation Agreement that was just passed legislatively. We were, in a sense, asking students and families to consider dual enrollment in the state of Louisiana, and they were earning credit, but we could not assure those same students and families that every college in the state of Louisiana would accept the credit. And as we were building out the high school experience to look much different than it has in previous years, to include dual enrollment coursework, that is something that we needed to correct. And so thankfully, we were able to work to have legislation in this particular session that allows for college credit earned at Louisiana universities to transfer to all the other Louisiana universities. So some people say, well, why hasn't that always happened? Well, it hasn't. And it just seems like a very common sense thing that should have happened. And we're thankful that finally that will happen. And so now whenever our students are taking dual enrollment from the universities, colleges and universities in our state, they can be assured and their parents can be assured that that credit will count whenever they enroll in a college in the state of Louisiana. So I just want to call out those 2 things here this morning.
Okay, Ms. Brophy.
Thank you so much. I have a question about what the eligibility requirements are.
Yes. And so it is a 2.5 GPA, and there's, in addition to the 2.5 GPA in the interim policy, there are a number of assessments that can be utilized, and so the policy lists out those specific assessment options. And then, as Dr. Reed mentioned, it also opened up to allow for more a counselor recommendation. So it's a 2.5 required, as well as any of those assessments or a counselor recommendation.
So is the counselor recommendation in place due to the emergency policy? Is that part of the original eligibility requirement, or is the counselor the aspect of the emergency policy?
The counselor recommendation is the result of the emergency policy and really exploring multiple measures for placement.
Okay. And then, so if I have a student and they have a 2.5 GPA, then they're accepted in dual enrollment. I met with some constituents that started talking about an ACT requirement. Can you tell me more about that?
So that is the previous policy. It did have an ACT requirement. So ACT as being required, one of those assessments that had to be included for those academic courses. And so that has been removed, and now is an option as well as a couple other assessments for that counselor recommendation. So it could be ACT or another test.
Okay. So if an institution has an ACT requirement in place, do they have it in place by their own choosing, or do you think it's just left over and they don't realize that the ACT requirement's not there anymore?
So we set the minimum policy for dual enrollment. Institutions are allowed to set higher policies, especially for particular courses that the institution can set a higher for some course if it's necessary.
So it's a 2.5 GPA. If you have that, then you get it. If you don't have that, then there are certain assessment options. one being an ACT requirement. What are the others?
So that includes AccuPlacer, Aspire, MAP, Pre-ACT, Pre-SAT, LEAP 2025, as well as ALEKS PBL. So there's a couple different assessments that can be utilized.
And if you meet the bar on any of those, then you would be eligible to take dual enrollment. Okay. And is that part of the emergency policy, or is that just part of the policy?
That's a part of the emergency policy.
So the 2.5 GPA is basically your policy, and all these others are things that you put in place to give people access. Is that right?
If I'm understanding, yes.
So let me try to clarify. The policy pre-pandemic was a GPA, an overall ACT, an ACT sub-score. Then the pandemic comes along and students can't take the ACT. So we asked for other measures to be allowed and a council recommendation to expand eligibility for students and to measure whether the eligibility would allow more students to participate and more students to successfully complete. So pre-pandemic, 2.5, ACT core, ACT sub-score. And Adam did a review of other states across the country. Other states had one ACT requirement, Louisiana had 2 ACT requirements. So we were not aligned with other states. After the pandemic, we added multiple measures. We kept the GPA, added multiple measures, and the high school counselor recommendation.
What is the ACT score requirement?
So for dual enrollment, for ACT, it is a 19 for math and an 18 for English in that host of options and assessments. That is the specific score.
So if your ACT, what's the ACT core requirement? I hear a 19 math, and what for English?
And English was 18.
Okay. And these are minimum requirements that the Board of Regents establishes. However, institutions across the state may have additional requirements to get in. And are the requirements the same for students who are pursuing academics as opposed to career and technical classes?
So the interim policy for dual enrollment is for academic courses only. And so for technical courses, we see some variation. This policy is for academic courses.
What are the eligibility requirements for technical classes?
That varies by institution. We'd say majority, what we see is an additional GPA requirement as well as potentially some safety standards. And again, that varies by course.
So is there not a Board of Regents policy on it?
Not specific to CT courses.
Okay. All right. The other question I had was about eligibility across institutions. As I'm engaging with constituents, because this conversation has started around accountability, one of the things they're pointing out is that you can be in the same vicinity and have multiple institutions, and their requirements for entry might be different. So that's when we talk about things theoretically here, but the reality of what happens when schools and districts and students try to start accessing things, it looks different and feels different in different places. And I just truly did not know what the eligibility requirements were. So I appreciate that.
Before we move on to other questions, we don't have a motion properly on the floor yet to receive this report. Can we go ahead and get that? Mr. Castillo, second by Ms. Bopey. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Castillo.
Right, as a follow-up to Dr. Bopey's question with regard to accountability, we had a superintendent yesterday, Superintendent William Kennedy, who pointed out from his rural parish, the challenge that he is having is, as it relates to dual enrollment, is that for 2 of the 3 high schools in his parish, there isn't a community college within an hour of his school. So it's been difficult to access those dual enrollment courses. That sort of takes us back to the earlier part of the conversation and part of the presentation on online and hybrid enrollment. What would you say to Superintendent Kennedy in terms of how we're going to help his schools and his students better access to those dual enrollment courses given the geography of his particular district?
A couple items. First of all, I think the dual enrollment portal has helped because it does allow every school district, parent to understand if they access the portal, what online offerings are available across the state of Louisiana. We found that many individuals that were working in dual enrollment were not even aware of online offerings across the state. So I'd love to talk to him and understand where he's located and what kinds of interest in dual enrollment he has. And so we do have online offerings that are available. We have used some emergency dollars to purchase for the Community Technical College System mobile labs for career technical education that can be driven to schools to deliver career technical courses for students as well. And so we're trying to bridge the access and opportunity gaps through online, through technology, through mobile labs, and then the next iteration of our work is going to be working on teacher capacity so that we have more high school teachers across the state of Louisiana who are eligible to teach dual enrollment. It will not only be great for the dual enrollment students, having 18 credit hours, a master's degree and 18 credit hours in the discipline, but it will be great for all students in that school to have a more rigorous and well-prepared teacher, high school teacher.
How's that coming along? We had a great presentation yesterday on teacher recruitment and retention and how challenging that is. Here in East Baton Rouge Parish, and I see Superintendent Narcisse in the back, and we're attempting to make some efforts to create greater access for our high school students to take advantage of dual enrollment courses. There were some proposals with regard to Baton Rouge Community College, and one of the issues that came up that Dr. Davis can attest to is that do we have enough qualified teachers to teach those dual enrollment courses? And it sounds like one, you're making progress along that way, and you're starting to see some positive results, Dr. Reed?
So we asked for some funding this legislative session. We've received that funding, and so it's not something that we are making progress on in terms of implementation, but in terms of funding a vision of the work. I believe the RCC and some of the others are trying to make sure they have the community college faculty to ensure that they're offering the courses. So as you know, in dual enrollment, you either have the college or university or community college faculty offering the course online at the high school or at the college themselves, or a high school teacher who is eligible to meet the SACS requirements to do that teaching. So we recognize that we have to build capacity. We're working to do that. We've received some funding to support it. And so that's work that's going to be starting now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Davis?
So this is a nice order given the discussions around how to access these courses, and then also the reference to the Bright Futures program in EBR. Because I have some questions regarding oversight and program evaluation surrounding our early collegiate academies that are authorized by the Board of Regents. In the past, these collegiate academies have been programs of choice where parents chose to enroll their students in a high school that was specifically geared towards providing high levels of access to collegiate courses. This coming school year, EBR and the Baton Rouge Community College will be operating a program called Bright Futures that looks very different. Parental choice about whether or not your child is going to be enrolled in a collegiate class is eliminated, along with all of the enrollment levers that were just discussed. Guidance counselor recommendation, the GPA component, and a host, everything that was just discussed. And parents are being told that their child will either have to be enrolled in AP, an international baccalaureate, or a dual enrollment, either in the university diploma pathway or the career and technical pathway. So there are those two avenues there. My question is, because this is the first program of its kind in the state, And in light of the fact that it could be replicated by other districts, I think that it behooves both of our boards to pay careful attention about both the positive and the negative consequences around our shared goal of equity and access to dual enrollment. And I'm wearing kind of three perspectives as I think about this, as a BESE member, as a university professor, and also as the mother of a rising ninth grader who will be forced into this program. The benefit clearly of Bright Futures is that that the district and its high schools have to be laser focused on quality access to dual enrollment in both the career and technical pathway and the university pathway. And so that is a wonderful thing, that we are expanding access across this entire district to both of those pathways. It's laudable, and both of our boards ought to be thinking about how we can make sure that that access is available when ESSER dollars are gone for children who are in rural communities as well as urban communities, to the point that Superintendent Kennedy made at our meeting on Tuesday. My concerns surround its impact on equity are about its mandatory nature. And I will say two things. First, let me be clear, I do not believe that the ACT or any other standardized test should be the end-all and be-all barrier for access to dual enrollment. I think that it is the best place to determine that if a child does not reach a certain standardized test score is for the teacher, the guidance counselor, and the parents and the students who know each other best and what that student is capable of to make decisions surrounding their participation in programs. But putting aside even the notion of whether it's age appropriate to mandate a 14-year-old in the 9th grade to participate in collegiate courses, regardless of the pathway that they are choosing, I'm concerned about its impact on TOPS GPA, right? So that we are forcing 9th graders into these programs after having removed all of the barriers that are supposed to be there to make sure that that child is ready for that course. Could have long-term consequences for them when they are applying for TOPS, and then also when they get to that college, the GPA that they have to keep. My second concern is that for our economically disadvantaged students, we may very well have 14-year-olds who are not ready for college-level courses as a 14-year-old, but will be as an 18-year-old. And by forcing them to enroll and to choose between either a college-level course on a university path or a career and technical path, that we are going to have some students who would choose a university path if they were left to their own devices, pushed into career and tech, and they will graduate from high school not ready for a four-year university because they will not have the high school credits that they need. So those are my concerns specifically around early collegiate academies and how that model might be changing across our state. And so I'd like some answers about how these programs are approved, as well as how we are going to evaluate their success, right, and their outcomes. And then third, more broadly speaking about dual enrollment in general, in the presentation, it was very clear that program integrity is left up to the college provider. And so my concern surrounds the intersection of that program integrity being left to the hands of the college provider and how that intersects with our accountability system. And so I would like to know, in terms of our accountability system and program integrity, are we going to be given at the Department of Education things like grade distributions across dual enrollment? Are we going to have crosstabs that are going to be available that show alignment with our state's end of course exams and their grades and courses that line up? So for instance, English classes, for example. So I just have questions about whether or not any thought has been given to that component, because to the points that have been made before, accountability is a really big deal, and I want to know how these two initiatives are going to intersect with each other. I know that was a lot. So.
jump in? Thank you for your comments. Let me differentiate. As we think about the umbrella of early college models in Louisiana, we think about course-by-course dual enrollment, AP, IB, and in early college models. The difference is in a dual enrollment opportunity, a student is availing themselves of a particular course. In an early college model, a high school is redesigned so that students either beginning in 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th are now taking courses that are part of their high school experience that are also counting towards their college experience. So you mentioned students left to their own devices. Obviously, we can't have students left to their own devices. The success of this work is around the counseling, the partnerships between colleges and universities and high schools, the parental engagement and involvement, and making sure that we understand where students, where their aptitude and interest is. There is a difference in an early college model. We have some of those in Louisiana, and a course-by-course dual enrollment opportunity. So I would say that first, in terms of understanding how these models work. And the Board of Regents has been agnostic on the particular model, but in support of every opportunity for students to pursue more college opportunities in high school, whatever those look like. Second, you talked about TOPS and the TOPS GPA. We know that students who are participating in receiving associate degrees or courses in high school get an early start. And TOPS has been expanded for those students that are successful, that they can now pursue their master's degree and other things. And so that information in terms of student success has already been addressed, but yes, we have to make sure that we understand how well students are doing. At the dual enrollment meeting yesterday or day before ours, we heard from college counselors who talked about reviewing mid-semester grades, tutoring infusion, grace periods of 3 weeks, allowing students to withdraw, all of these things to try to make sure we are wrapping ourselves around students with an eye towards student success, but also an eye towards equity of opportunity. There are many parents in this state of Louisiana whose 9th graders are already participating in early college, IP, IB, AP, etc. Many students. So there is a difference in an early college model where a high school is redesigned, the fast forward initiatives where high schools are redesigned, and course-by-course dual enrollment. To the accountability piece, we heard from the former principal of the year at our dual enrollment task force meeting, and he said to us, principals move with the accountability system. If you want to accelerate dual enrollment or other college opportunities, the accountability system has to incentivize that. Now, I'm not an expert in the accountability system. You've asked me questions about what would be offered. I don't know what is offered currently in AP, in IB, in early college, in dual enrollment to BESE, so that you can see the success of students or not. So we stand ready to have the conversations about how to align successfully accountability with dual enrollment with AP and IB in a manner that allows students to have access to opportunity and that does not stigmatize one over the other, but talks about the value of all. I think that's important.
A couple of things, Dr. Davis. One, in the way that the department believes that the configuration and modality of the school and the selection of the school should be the choice of a parent, whether it's a neighborhood traditional school, a public charter, whether it's homeschool, whether it's a non-public school. We feel the same way about offerings in our high school experience, that parents and their families should have the opportunity to make decisions and choices from a menu of services, whether that's dual enrollment, that's CTE focused or academic focused, whether it's AP, whether it's IB, whether it's any other option. We just believe as an agency that there should be a menu of options to the extent that a system can provide those options available to families. When it comes to accountability, I think an accountability system has to, at a minimum, do two things. One, I think it has to be able to share with the public the quality of the school. And that has to be an honest look at what is happening in that particular school. The second thing that I think an accountability system needs to be able to do, which is not universally accepted, is that it needs to incentivize behaviors. And as a board, as a state board of education, it is one of the policy levers that we have to incentivize schools to do things. And so that's why as we continue to look at accountability, I think that as we look at high schools and the way that high schools operate, in the same way that Superintendent Boucher has mentioned many times, that the work of a high school is a little different than the work of a K-6 or a K-8. We have to be mindful of, are we incentivizing those things that we believe matter for kids and their futures and the future of our state. And so as we move forward in that discussion, I just want to make sure that we continue to put that in the forefront of, one, it has to be an honest look at the school, but also two, we have to use whatever levers we have, and sometimes those aren't as many as we would like, to incentivize behaviors. And I think that as the high school principal of the year mentioned, and from my work in both the school and the system level, systems and educators respond to that system because they want to do well. They want their schools to be viewed in a particular light within their communities. And so I just think we have to keep that in mind as we move forward.
I'll just say one more thing and then I'll let this issue go. My concern, so first I do agree with you regarding the accountability system in terms of changes that need to be made so that career and technical is valued equally and with our university-bound diplomas. So I hear you on that. My concern though, right, is that we've just heard you say, right, that principals, that schools and educators respond to the accountability system. And so when we give those programs equal weight, right, and we create a system that allows all of the levers, right, that are supposed to be used to make sure that students are ready for the courses that they're going to be enrolled in, right? So we remove the guidance counselor, we remove the test score, we remove the GPA, right? That when you see as a superintendent, right, that model is available to you and that it allows you greater access to those things that will increase your accountability score, right, that will occur, right? And so we will see a proliferation of models like this. And so to be fair, right, like this may be incredibly successful, right? And as a parent in the East Baton Rouge Parish Public School System, I hope that it is. But what I cannot get an answer for is how we're going to keep track of whether or not it is successful and whether or not it is having the opposite effect in terms of equity that we desire. And so that'll be, I won't say anything else, but just know that I'm concerned and I hope that I was heard. Thank you.
I don't want to zero in on a specific school system here today, but I would say just across the state, we are seeing an increasing interest among our schools and our school systems in rethinking what that high school experience does look like. And we are seeing increasing interest in providing additional access to AP, to dual enrollment, to IB. Part of that, as you mentioned, is because of the additional stimulus dollars, and we have to think about that moving forward from a sustainability standpoint. But to the other issue that you're raising, I think it's also going to be important for us moving forward if we do adopt different accountability measures for a high school to make sure that we are continuing to track data, look at subgroup information, to make sure that things like the issues that you mentioned and areas for which you are concerned, that we are tracking those things out and we have answers for those things. And I think that we owe that to each other, and we certainly owe it to the state and our kids to make sure that we are monitoring those particular issues.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Orange-Jones?
This might have been covered already, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question as a follow-up point of clarification for myself, Dr. Davis. Would a child would choose one of those pathways, right? So dual enrollment, IVC, AP, a minimum of one. So if they were not choosing a college, or they would just choose an IBC path, correct? I just want to make sure I understand your concern. I understand we're not going deep into a specific, system example, but since you raised it.
Right, so the child has the ability to, or has to enroll in one of these options, a career and technical dual enrollment class, an AP, an IBC, or a college level, a university path dual enrollment. So the choice is there, among those options is there, but not to not do it, I guess, which is a source of great angst in the community.
Because, but why would it be a source of great angst if they could choose an IBC path? Like, I guess I'm trying to understand what would be, there's such a broad range of choice in what was just, it's one class.
They only have to choose one.
They have to choose just one class.
One class each year that they are in high school.
Okay, just wanted to clarify this.
Okay, Mr. Morris?
I'm looking for further clarification on the same concern. The initial conversation was that there are minimum requirements in place that could vary from school to school, but then Dr. Davis brought the point where her child is going to be forced to pursue this pathway. I don't understand how you can be forced if you don't meet the minimum requirement.
So, couple points. The standards that we mentioned, the emergency policies are for academic, English, math, dual enrollment, etc. Louisiana has, of course, phenomenal community technical colleges. Those are open admission. You don't have to have a high school diploma to enroll in a community or technical college in Louisiana. You don't have to have an ACT score to enroll in a college or university. You do need it for TOPS. And so you do have education partners that are open enrollment, that are offering a range of options for students in our state. And so I want to make sure that I'm clarifying the early college model is one of many, AP, IB, early college, dual enrollment. And you have education providers that could be an open admissions institution, a community technical college, or a four-year institution that has academic standards. So that's the range of who's offering it and what we're offering in Louisiana.
Thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely.
One other question. I've heard several conversations in my district where there's some confusion about the enrollment process. Again, same topic. When a student enrolls, as I understand it, they have the option to enroll in a class just for the experience of enrolling in a college class without being enrolled as a college student. Or they can enroll as a high school student, or they can enroll in the class as a high school student to get college credit. But the bottom line is they've got to make a decision one way or the other. Is that the right interpretation?
So we were just, Adam and I were just in a conversation about pre-dual enrollment. So you do have colleges in Louisiana, I know LSU, and I think there are others that are offering pre-dual enrollment courses for students so they get sort of the lay of the land around how this works before they pursue a course for credit. But I can get you more information about that, and I'd love to know what school, if you have more specific information, but I'm happy to have a discussion about that and to get you more information. So currently, if a student is enrolled in a dual, my daughter, enrolled in dual enrollment in high school, participating in academic courses with academic requirements. She gets an email mid-course from her faculty member saying this is your grade, this is the drop date, every student gets that, right? So students are informed mid-semester whether or not they're on track to successfully complete and reminded of the drop date if they want to drop the course. If she dropped the course, she would have had the experience, but not the credit or potentially a harmful grade on her GPA.
But you still get a W on the college transcript.
You could withdraw. You could withdraw.
So thank you for that. So is there another pathway for your daughter where she could have decided, I want to enroll in a class and take a college class, but I don't want to risk that W on my transcript?
Yes.
Is that an option as well?
Yes, it is an option. I don't know as much about the pre-dual enrollment courses that are offered right now, but I will look back to you with that. We had some conversation briefly about that. Adam, do you want to add?
So there are some institutions that will allow a student to sit in that classroom, particularly if it's taught out in the high school, right? And choose at the beginning of the semester if they're going to register for college credit. And some students may sit in that classroom who are essentially auditing the class, right? Sitting in the classroom for college purposes. They're sitting in that classroom earning a high school grade and not registering it for college credit. Not all institutions allow that, but some do. Just like with AP, there are some students who take an AP class and never sit for the exam, right? In the case of dual enrollment, you need to make that decision at the beginning of the semester during that registration time period.
Thank you. That's the understanding I was looking for. So I'm interested in, to Dr. Davis's point, I think earlier, sometimes what looks good on paper doesn't translate the same way in the real world, right? So I'm interested in if we have any data, maybe next time you return to visit with us, you can share that helps us to appreciate whether we do see a high number of W's on those transcripts, right? And whether or not we're seeing students make the right decision there with regard to success whenever they make that decision. Do I want to take this as a high school class, or do I want to take this as a college class, based on my level of preparation, and I don't end up with a W on my college transcript, or worse on my college transcript?
In a normal year, we see about 3% Ws of the dual enrollment classes taken by Regents institutions, but from public institutions. I can't report out on what for students taking classes in private colleges, but from public colleges and universities, about 3% course enrollments land up with a W, and only about 2% additionally get an F. So students are passing. Yeah, so in a normal year, non-pandemic year, about 95% of students are passing a class. Now, some students pass with a D, which would mean that would not be as transferable, and useful towards their ultimate degree. But
you have the percent D's also?
For 2018-19, D was an additional 3%. Okay. Yeah, so 92% getting an A, B, or C.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so obviously I'm, oh, there you go. I should know that by now, 8 years in, right? But speaking to that, obviously you all, as BESE members, are closer to this as it relates to your constituents than we may be from the Board of Regents perspective. So I definitely can appreciate I don't know if the word is intense, but the attention to detail, and obviously that's why you all have been elected, and I totally appreciate that. I know dual enrollment has been a very much so a focus of mine since I even got on the board 8 years ago. It's very much, and I'm very excited about the engagement that we have between our commissioner and Dr. Brumley, and I'm excited about the things that are going on. I love the fact that I was just telling Ms. Jones, I love the fact that we can give people access, and the idea that wow, I just did a college level course. And I would not have thought that I could have done that. So now I have the belief that I can move in that direction if I so choose, when it was never something I even thought was a possibility prior, right? That's the mentality that I had about it from the very beginning. And it was hoping that there were people significantly smarter than me that could figure out how to make it happen. But obviously it's already been, I don't need to belabor the point, but obviously AP, dual enrollment, IBC, and the fact that they're choosing one class They still have their English, they still have their math, they still have their normal, once again, as you know, Commissioner Readiness mentioned, high school experience. And there are still on and off ramps, as it was so eloquently mentioned just now by Dr. Lowe, in terms of, you know, what that process looks like. On and off ramps during the year, on and off ramps maybe after the, you know, maybe I don't want to go the IBC route anymore. Maybe I decide I want to go, you know, the college route. So the flexibility of it, number one, the fact that it's one class, right, number two, I think that we have a great program. You know, I think the Fast Forward program is going, and then the fact that in Louisiana, for once, we have something that is relatively different, relatively new in the area of education. And I think that we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our children to give it a legitimate chance and a legitimate shot. And I'm excited about it, so.
Thank you. Ms. Boche?
Okay, you know, I have the privilege of sitting on the dual enrollment task force as well, and I just want to applaud the Board of Regents for implementing those emergency measures for eligibility for these dual enrollment classes. It opens up a wealth of opportunities for so many of our students here in Louisiana, and a lot of the intangibles that, you know, Chairman Temple just mentioned. It gives kids confidence, I can do this, the persistence is there, their likelihood of obtaining a post-secondary credential increases significantly. Now, all the details around that, I think, are what we're talking about, because prior to that emergency declaration, there was a minimum GPA top score required in those content areas for the general ed curriculum. LCTCS courses were always open in the technical arena to everyone. The parts that they had some issues with LCTCS, if they were taking some of those general ed courses like the math and the English, those requirements were still in effect before your, you know, emergency lifting of those. And I think I saw some, I guess, research, I think that Mr. Castillo brought to our attention a while back on students who scored maybe 17 on the ACT, and when you track them eventually through college or in these courses, you saw that they performed in many cases at the norm or in excess of the norm. You know, I personally know kids. I've been in K-12 education over 50 years. I personally know students who have both ACT scores that are sitting there with masters and doctorates at this point. Then I know people who scored extremely high on the ACT who never completed the degree. So there are a lot of measures in terms of how are kids made up and how can they be successful and what supports you need to put into place. All right, having said that, the counseling piece around this for eligibility of entry, I think, is extremely important. And as Dr. Davis mentioned, when you're counseling with kids, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, there's got to be a family effort in terms of parents, students, because I would venture to say, and I think I said this at the dual enrollment task force meeting, at the age of 15, how many people around this table knew exactly where they were going to be today in their life history? I mean, we each may have changed our goals, our aspirations 4, 5, 6 times, who knows? And then there were some committed people who just knew the day they were born almost what their passion was and what they were going to do. But having worked with students all these years and teenagers all these years, they really don't know, you know, that young age. And there has to be a way to explore some of these pathways. All right, having said all that, you know, Dr. Brumley mentioned when we talk about the accountability system, because our K-12 BESE members really are going to have to be focusing in on this particular part of this in the very near future in terms of high schools. Part of it is to incentivize behaviors.
But the comment that was made, Kim made at the very beginning, and that I think we all believe in, we're looking at dual enrollment opportunities for every student. And when we, as K-12 educators, look to incentivize pathways, then we have to have these pathways in some fashion available for all of our students. Not just the kids who are pursuing general ed, 4-year university courses or an IBC credential, because all of these things require some type of an exit assessment, whether it is a final exam in a general education course or an industry-based credential or written assessment that you have to take. We as K-12 educators have a significant group of our students, because it's a microcosm of our society. We have a significant group of our students who, and I don't know, I'm using the word significant. We have students who are what we call the April Gun students, if you follow the legislation, who are being granted high school diplomas, but they're not passing, there is no requirement for these students to pass any type of an exit exam, the way K-12 is fashioned. There are these students that we would not potentially maybe counsel into a calculus course or a college algebra course, or even maybe an industry-based credential that requires written assessments, because right now there's no provision for that. So when we look at what we're incentivizing in accountability and working together at some point, because I know there's some directive, Kim and I have talked about it, about how do we service those kids post-secondary. What about our special needs kids? Not, I don't even know if these two words go together, not our typical special needs kids, that we offer supports to and do extremely well, but the kids who have cognitive challenges that are still getting high school diplomas that will be part of this accountability. What track do they have? What is an exit document for them? How do we have a pathway for them that in our strength of diploma index and accountability, how do they attain that highest level? What is their several pathways for them and exit criteria for them that may be a little different? So when we talk about dual enrollment for everyone, let's be perfectly clear who everyone is. That's every child within the state of Louisiana, regardless of ethnicity, special needs, English language learners, kids who are coming here with no proficiency skills in our language, and they're coming in as teenagers, not as 5 and 6-year-olds as they develop those. So I want us to be very careful when we look at this, and we're talking about opportunities for kids. Let's make sure we include every child in a pathway that is meaningful and works toward getting that child some type of a credential that is attainable for that population, and that makes that child a contributing member of society with whatever supports we need to put in place. So I think we've made major strides as we've had these meetings together. And again, I'll end it with what I started. I applaud the Board of Regents for looking at this criteria and widening that criteria. And I would challenge our board to do some of these same things when we look at some of these criteria that we're setting up. How do we become altogether more inclusive and provide an opportunity for every child in the state of Louisiana? Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other comments or questions? If not, we have yes ma'am.
Hi, my name is Katarina, and I'm the student member for the Board of Regents. I had 2 questions. My first question, maybe this had already been answered, but I just wanted to ask, are they allowed to switch their track? If they start one, are they allowed to switch throughout the process of their high school career? Okay. And then how does this look for students who come from out of state? Like if someone was living for 2 years in another state and they came here, would they have to take additional classes to keep up? Or would they just start and finish?
speak to it. If you're asking about a high school student who's from out of state and moves into Louisiana, I don't know, Kate, you'll have to speak to.
So if we have a particular program that requires a particular set of courses that's in a focused area, so for instance, let's take an associate's degree pathway that's career and technical education. So a welding associate's degree or something such as that. If that student hasn't had that coursework and they step in as a senior, then it's unlikely that they can graduate with an associate's degree in career and technical education. But they certainly would be able to, the high school would be able to accept the credits that they have from another state, and they would certainly be on the pathway to a diploma. It just may not be in one of the specialized areas that we'll share out momentarily.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, we have a speaking card for Mr. Gordon Ford.
Good morning. Good morning, President Garvey, Chairman Temple, members of the boards. It's a pleasure to be with you. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing in this area, particularly for a lot of the questions that were asked today. I want to thank the Commissioner and the Superintendent as well for the work that they're doing. I'm the director of Lincoln Prep School, which is a Type 2 charter school in Greenland, Louisiana, and proud to say that we have done a lot of pioneering work in this. We were recognized by the Dual Enrollment Commission as one of 9 schools where every one of our graduates graduated with a credential, and one of only 5 schools that's 75% or more minority enrollment, and every one of our students graduated with a credential. We're in rural North Louisiana. We're 92% economically disadvantaged. One of the things that I found is that a lot of the problems we have in dual enrollment is communication. Colleges and high schools don't speak the same language. I'm fortunate in that I worked in higher education before my military career, and that my brother is a vice chancellor at Southern University in New Orleans. And so we have the opportunity to crosstalk and talk about these things. I recently participated in a Zoom meeting where Southern University of Shreveport was working with the school in Caddo Parish, encouraging them to participate in dual enrollment. And you could see from the body language that some of the folks on the colleges weren't interested. It's just something we don't do, something we aren't bothered with, something we don't understand. And I was asked to be a part of that simply because the university staff realized we don't speak high school. Can you come on and explain this to the high school folks in a way that will help them understand why this is important? We were able to do that. We're now working together, and they're putting together some of their programs. Lincoln Prep started our early college academy in 2018, before there was a fast forward, and we are not a changeover school. We created a new model with Southern University in Shreveport that is a school within a school. We started with about a third of our high school juniors that year working on an associate degree program. For the upcoming junior year, based on the emergency rules, and we certainly appreciate that, we have more than 50% of our students that are currently taking courses this summer. And if they're successful in those courses this summer, those kids will move forward into our associate degree program, and we have the potential to graduate more than half of our students with associate degrees. And a lot of it just has to do with knowing what to do and having the will to do it. Some of the questions that you're asking about students in 9th grade, we've done that before. We did that before the pandemic. My own son participated as a 9th grader, took courses in web design. We use it as an opportunity to broaden our catalog, to allow kids to take elective courses that we aren't able to offer as a small school. And it really gives kids an opportunity to see and do things that they would not normally do. As to your questions regarding what about kids that fail courses, many of our community colleges, Southern University in Shreveport definitely does, has a repeat delete. If kids take a course and they fail the course, we enroll them in the course again, give them stronger supports, and they're able to make a better grade in that course and remove the failing course. As we look at this, we have to understand that equity is going to be one of the most important problems we face. I know it's problematic sometimes to feel like we're not giving parents a choice, we're not giving kids a choice. Well, a lot of our parents in economically disadvantaged families don't know what to choose. They don't know what to choose. And so we have to do some pushing. We have to do some plotting. The report that you just saw said 52% of our kids graduate with credentials. It does not drill down to tell you that 75% of our white students graduate with credentials, but only 48% of our black students graduate with credentials, and only 47% of our economically disadvantaged students, to Ms. Beauche's point, graduate with credentials. If we're really committed to every single student, we have to be committed to every single student. And that does include accountability and recognizing other measures of college readiness in our accountability, and also recognizing that dual enrollment is important and it matters. One of the things that's going on in the current discussion about accountability is that there's greater weight being paid to AP courses than dual enrollment courses. And I ask the question, why? And some folks are saying that, well, AP courses have a national exam, and so a high school teacher teaching an AP course and taking a national exam is more rigorous than a college course. I said to them, I think the Board of Regents would take exception to that. I think the Board of Regents would take exception to that. The fact that there are many in the high school world that think that 3 AP courses are equal to 15 college courses is a problem. And so we need to get on the same page, speak the same language, and be committed to when we say every child, we mean every child. Thank you for your time.
Okay. That's all the comment cards. Let's go back again and see if there's any more comments or questions from BESE members on this item, or anyone up on the board today. Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any objections to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 4.3, consideration of an update report regarding Fast Forward.
Okay, can we get a motion on the floor to entertain or receive this report? Ms. Davis, do we have a second? Mr. Castillo? Thank you. Superintendent Brumley?
Yeah. Thank you, President Garvey. Yesterday, our State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education considered a new set of Fast Forward pathways. And as a reminder, Fast Forward pathways are basically pathways that are built within local communities between local school systems and industry partners, local school systems and community colleges, or local school systems and their four-year partners. This is something that is certainly on the cutting edge if we look nationally, and these partnerships are being developed locally. So it's not a statewide one-size-fits-all approach, although once a partnership and a diploma pathway is built and approved by our state board, it can be used across the entire state. So the needs that you see potentially in the bayou parishes may be different from what you see in Northeast Louisiana, but they are developed within their local communities. And so what we have today that we are wanting to share with you are some of the new diploma pathways that have been developed. These are the pathways that allow our students to not only graduate high school with a high school diploma, but it also allows them to graduate with a full apprenticeship, where they can gain meaningful and high-wage employment quickly, or it allows them to graduate with an associate's degree, or it allows them to graduate with a coherent set of courses that lead to a four-year degree. Not just random courses that they've earned credit, but a coherent set of courses that lead to a degree. And so we're excited. Dr. Ernie Singleton on our Career and College Readiness team, Assistant Superintendent, is going to make a presentation for you all today.
Good morning, everyone. As Dr. Brumley stated, yesterday we brought forth additional pathways for Fast Forward. But just as a reminder, in 2021, 39 pathways were approved by BESE to be implemented statewide for students to participate in this innovative high school experience, where they're on the high school campus in grades 9 and 10, and in grades 11 and 12, possibly on the post-secondary campus, or at an approved apprenticeship location, earning credit for the career. So yesterday, BESE approved an additional 76 pathways to be implemented statewide. So the next few slides that you have in your packet actually display these various pathways that are being implemented across the state. We continue to work with school systems on innovative opportunities for students and are seeking additional apprenticeship models to implement across the state. You'll see in the pathways that we did bring, we have carpenter, electrician, nursing, welder, and youth restaurant as apprenticeship opportunities. As we move into the 22-23 school year, we're going to continue to assist school systems to implement these particular pathways and develop additional opportunities for them to use with their students. So we just wanted to just give you an overview of all of the pathways that were approved and see if you had any questions or concerns or comments or anything else that you would like to share. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments from board members?
Mr. Dory, just
Yes, sir.
on here, if you look even, Dr. Singleton, if you go to page slide 22, and you see proposed pathways within Region 6, and you look at Region 6, Jumpstart, and then you look at some pathways, you can see that, for example, it says Associates of Applied Science and Cloud Computing. What I want to make sure the boards understand about this is within this region, this particular region and school systems here have formed a partnership so that students can, in their high school years, earn this Associate of Applied Science in Cloud Computing. So they're not just building it for the sake of building it. They're building it because they believe that they have students that would benefit or have an interest in doing this particular thing. And so what this will allow this school system to do is say many of the degree requirements for diploma that we previously would have had to have ensured that were completed are now being substituted so that students can do this particular thing. And so this is not theoretical, this is reality, that this is going to happen for kids. So I just wanted to try to drill down a little bit on what that means for our students.
Chairman Temple.
Two things. Got the opportunity to go and see the water campus. There's a cybersecurity program there. We've got them a lot of different places, but what percentage of the folks that were there, I'm looking at Dr. Bosper, she was invited me, were under 20 years old. If I'm not mistaken, I think the vast majority of the students at that venue were young, okay? And there's a amazing, unfortunately or fortunately, amazing need for those type of services, right? And that speaks directly to what we're talking about. The other thing, and I remember this from the very, my thought from the very beginning, and we haven't really even mentioned it, if we put children in a position where they're getting these degrees in high school, one of two things is happening. The state is funding less from a TOPS perspective because they're getting this stuff in high school, and that means that there's less that they're going to have to get when they get to college, even if they decide that they want to move towards that 4-year degree, right? As well as the, am I correct in what I'm saying here, right? So it's better for the student, in my opinion. It's going to be better for the state, in my opinion. There's an opportunity to keep some of these kids in state with this. Once again, I'm just, and I want to bring up the point about TOPS because we had not really mentioned that in detail as well. And if anybody may be able to speak to that, the potential, if we even know what the potential savings from the TOPS perspective represents, if there is any,
The other point that Commissioner Howard was talking about is that the student can then use the degree for a master's degree.
Right, to get their master's. Yeah, without a doubt. And I graduated in 3 years, got a master's, was working on a PhD, but I went into college with no college credit. Had I used this program, I would have, while I was still playing ball, gotten my doctorate degree on the state.
go back in
I think you did
time.
pretty well, sir. I think you did.
Okay, Mr. Morris.
It looks like we've doubled the capacity of Auburn. For one particular reason, I'm interested in what you got a sense of what the current enrollment is in the Fast Forward program and what the projected enrollment is with this additional capacity. And one of the reasons I'm asking the question is the BESE member, part of the BESE accountability work group, have concerns about the pace for rolling out any potential updates and keeping up with the interest in these programs. So if we have some sense of what the participation is, we get a better significance of what the potential impacts could be to the accountability system and focus on rolling out any changes as appropriate.
So I don't have those numbers with me right now, Mr. Morris, we can get those, provide those for you, but we do have a set of early adopters throughout the state. And as a matter of fact, our career and college readiness team has worked over the course of the year to give those early adopters additional support over the course of the year. I do believe that we will see growth just in the fact that we have additional pathways for diplomas that are being approved, because our team didn't sit in an office and make these. These were developed at the system level with partners. And so I just have to believe that if they were in collaboration with industry partners, with higher ed partners, they're about to do these things. But you mentioned the word accountability. If the accountability system aligns in some ways to further incentivize this, I think you'll see exponential growth of students who are moving in this particular way to be ready either to go to work, a high-wage job, or to continue their college experience. But we, as Superintendent O'Shea mentioned, we do have to be mindful to other nuances as that proposal moves forward.
So I think you and I are seeing eye to eye on the sensitivity here. If you guys can get those numbers to us, to the work group, I appreciate it.
I can tell you that before this endeavor, and in 2019, out of over, and you heard me quote this number, out of over 40,000 graduates in the state of Louisiana, 9 students graduated with their high school degree and a full apprenticeship. And that's over 40,000 again, both associate's degree and high school degree. I want the number was around 150 that graduated dually with both of those things. So I'll be interested to know at the conclusion of this year, the 2022 year, what those numbers might look like, just from the early adopters.
And just to respond to Ms. Morris, like I'm one of the early adopters of this in my school system. And this graduating class, we had 4 kids. We've had as many as 7 over the last few years graduating with their associate degree and their high school diploma at the same time. But as these pathways are being adopted, you have to realize it's going to take 4 years to see it come, because you're starting then at the 9th grade level, taking some of these, because think of what an associate degree means. 60 credit hours, that's 20 courses. So if a high school kid, you're on a 7 period a day course load, and you multiply that times 4 years, you're looking at 28 courses a kid you can take. So if you're saying, well, to get the associate degree, 20 of them have to be dual enrollment, you really can't start at your junior year to do this. So in order to exit with these credentials, you really have to begin that process as freshmen. So you're not going to see a tremendous, you can see who's enrolled or who is choosing to enter a pathway. But to see completion rates, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, and to be clear, my request is about those enrolled, right? Because the accountability system, as you said earlier, the accountability system is going to incentivize that enrollment, that participation, and that continuation to continue to graduation. So that's the number I'm asking for participation. Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent.
Okay, Ms. Brophy, please.
Dr. Bromley, can you confirm for me if once we approve these pathways, if they're available statewide, I believe that's the case, but I just want to make sure.
Yes, Dr. Vogt, as soon as the board approves them, the pathway, even if it's developed within a region, it's available statewide.
Thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up then? It was my understanding that if you take that pathway in conjunction with that partner, it's available. So if I'm in North Louisiana, if I'm taking one with Readiness Community College down south, that could be problematic. I think your region would have to then adopt it within your region with a similar one with a university partner within the region. So while that
It's
one's
the
available,
courses.
it's not available to transfer unless you get it approved.
It is the courses. Dr. Singer can speak to the actual courses.
Right. Yes, so if a pathway is developed with NUNES and a school system is in North Louisiana who wants to do a similar pathway, they can map out those same courses with a community college in that particular area.
Right, that have to come get it approved. Because we did this with Delgado, for example, community college in the New Orleans area. They had a program, but if I wanted it to partner with NUNES Community College, we could look at the similar courses, but then have to come to get approval for the pathway with that university partner.
No, they don't have to come to get approval with that particular partner because the courses are transferable. The course titles are very similar across the various community and technical colleges. So when you look at that particular pathway that has been developed, say at UMass, say the school system is in North Louisiana to be Union Parish, and they're saying they want to implement this cloud computing, a student wants to take cloud computing at a school in Union Parish, they can find similar courses at, say, Louisiana Delta that match those particular courses because of the articulation matrix that has been developed by the board.
It's changed, that we had to come for approval from Delgado.
Well, let's talk through the pre-apprenticeship for electrician on page 21. How would that work?
Dr. Vogt, we're going to invite Jessica Valwanda.
I think I'm her favorite board member.
So can you repeat your question so I can make sure I answer it?
So we were just talking through the example of if you wanted to take a pathway, a fast forward pathway that was in one region of the state and move it to another region of the state, that you would have to work with the university local partner to figure out how to make that work. I want to look at it from the Jumpstart perspective, and like the example of the pre-apprenticeship for electrician with ETA, I'm assuming is the Electrical Training Alliance. So what is that? What would the process be for a school that wanted to develop such a pathway?
Excellent. Thank you for repeating it. So the apprenticeships are statewide. So whereas community colleges have a location-based footprint, apprenticeships have training facilities across the state. So with ETA and the Electrical Training Alliance, Carpenters International, Ochsner, wherever there is the ability to partner with one of their apprenticeships, you're able to implement that pathway. So for that one, even though it was first approved, I believe, in Region 4, anyone in the state could have met with one of their ETA training providers and partnered through those. The courses aren't dual enrollment courses specific to a college campus. They're courses that are specific to LDOE. Did that satisfy? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, the rationale in regards to when you speak to those programs, the programs such as the pre-apprentice nursing program that's branded commercially with Ochsner, why are those programs branded with a commercial partner?
Because those classes with Ochsner, with Carpenters International Training Fund, with Electrical Training Alliance, they're specifically aligned to their Louisiana Workforce Commission approved registered apprenticeship. So they're aligned to another governing body, and that's why they get a branded name.
Are they funded, who are they funded by?
I think there are multiple different funding sources from LDOE funding, state funding, into like WIOA funding that comes through the Louisiana Workforce Commission.
I'm just unclear about why they're branded commercial.
So because they're tied to a Louisiana Workforce Commission registered apprenticeship. So they are nationally registered apprenticeships that have a specific curriculum tied to their approval through Louisiana Workforce Commission.
But I think that the question she's asking, Ochsner as opposed to some other hospital system, why is it wrong? So is the people approached Ochsner as a partner? You could have partnered with another hospital system, I think is what we're trying to get to.
Yes, that's correct. So Ochsner and Jefferson Parish came together to create this pre-apprenticeship model. Whereas if a nursing facility in Rapides wanted to do this, they could also do this, but that particular apprenticeship model would have to be a registered apprenticeship with the Louisiana Workforce Commission, whereas Ochsner is. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Norris?
Yeah, same topic, different perspective maybe. If I'm a student that's taking a Zoom class for new enrollment, that's possible, right? Okay. If I'm a student in Region 1 and I want to take something that's offered in Region 5, can I take it via Zoom?
What I would say to that, Mr. Morris, is these are local school system decisions around their offerings. So if a local school system wanted to make that particular offering available to that student, they could. But local school systems are going to be limited by their ability to support their offerings. So if a local school system wanted to do something in another region, they could, but that would be based on their ability to do so. It's not off limits.
But it seems to me like that would add extra overhead, whereas if I could just click on that link, like everybody else that's enrolled in the class, right, then there's no additional overhead for the local district. I'm just connecting to something that's already offered, just like it was, say it was approved by the state, but it was something I found on the internet, right? But it's been approved, so in this case, you guys have showed us 78 different pathways here, right? And so why couldn't I just enroll, if it's offered, remotely, what difference does it make what region I am, or if I'm just in a rural area within that district?
It doesn't make a difference other than the fact that that student is a student of a local school system, and that local school system would have to authorize that particular course registration the same way that they would say, student who wants to enroll in third-hour geometry. That local school system has a procedure in order for those things to happen.
So I think what I'm getting at is, it's possible, you can do it, right? You just have to get the approval of the local school system to do it. Is that the right interpretation?
Yes.
And can we communicate that to local school districts if that's possible?
Also, Commissioner Reed just reminded me that the bill from Senator Hewitt just passed that allows students to transfer to other schools within their own school system if a fast forward opportunity is available at another high school within their system that is not available at their specific school. So that is also going to help grow the programs. But we're happy to further communicate out to school systems and counselors what you are mentioning.
Thank you. I think that's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any more questions or comments from board members? Hearing none, do we have any more cards? That's it? The cards? Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, that motion carries. Next item, please.
Item 4.4, consideration of Extension Academy. Novo Public Schools. Recommendation is to approve.
Okay, can we get a motion to approve? Ms. Davis, can we get a second? Mr. Rock? Okay. From the department, do we have any information on this item?
I think what I'd like to do, of course, we have a recommendation for a 2-year extension of this model. What I would like to do, if she's still in the audience, is call up Kate Swindle from Youth Force Nova. I don't know if Kate's still here. Kate's here. And she can just share a little bit about how this program works within her community.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. And before I forget, if the person who runs the talk clock could send me that app, I need it for my own airtime on Zoom. So just, for personal improvement, I ask for that help. Members, I'm here today just for a quick update on Youth Force NOLA and the New Orleans Extension Academy program. 3 years ago, this joint body approved a program intended to pilot a new approach to blend the K-12 and higher education system and smooth transitions to post-secondary education and the workforce for our young people. You indicated that you are interested in innovation in a field that needed more work and that needed innovation. We come before you today to share the results to date and encourage you to approve the renewal for 2 years as recommended by the staff of both the department and the Board of Regents. Extension Academy was created to serve students whose transition to life after high school may not follow that traditional bachelor's degree path. By extending high school for 1 year, Extension Academy creates a publicly funded 5-year high school program in which our young people not only earn a high school diploma, but also develop career insights and connections, earn credits toward an associate's degree, and earn advanced industry credentials. So very much in line with all the discussion today. This program aligns with both BESE's college and career readiness goals and Board of Regents' 2030 credential attainment goals. It ensures that young people transition smoothly to life after high school. COVID-19 and Hurricane Ida have undoubtedly influenced the program in ways that have made it challenging to launch a pilot and generalize takeaways to more normal circumstances. Nevertheless, the pilot has yielded promising results. 40 students completed the program in school years 2019-20 and 2020-2021. Upon completion of the program, 61% enrolled in further education, including bachelor's degree programs, began full-time work, enrolled part-time in further education while working part-time, or continued pre-apprenticeship technical training or internships that will be begun during the program. Over the next 2 years, we in New Orleans look forward to implementing the Extension Academy model better prepared to adjust to the types of disruptions that COVID might create. More than 150 young people have already enrolled in the program for the coming school year. At the same time, we're focused on minimizing disruptions and producing results that are good for our young people and our community and are generalizable to other districts across the state and across the country. We appreciate the department and the Board of Regents staff's recommendation to extend the pilot, and we look forward to any discussion.
One point, Mr. Garvey. First of all, we'd like to thank Kate for coming up and offering remarks. She can add some personal color to the experience. It really hasn't been, quote, fair to fully judge outcomes of the model just because we've been in a global health pandemic. I had the opportunity to visit the site, and they are working with a group of kids, and one of the things that was striking about the children is their investment in their own futures, and their ownership of their work and their desire to complete the program. And so I'm really looking forward to, and hopefully we are moving to a post-pandemic environment. I am really looking forward to seeing in a couple of years what the outcomes look like with the level of commitment that Kate and her colleagues continue to show.
Okay, do we have any questions? Yes, Ms. Bovee?
I'm sorry if you covered this while I stepped out, but how do students become involved in it? Is this something that they make a commitment early on and they're in from like 9th grade to 12 plus, or is it something that, okay, why don't you tell me?
Yeah.
I can think so.
Dr. Singleton, and will help you on the official policy front. The Extension Academy is really designed for young people who are otherwise not TOPS eligible or who have not earned an advanced credential. So this is really about bridging into post-secondary opportunities, whether on to associate and bachelor pathways or into the world of work, where young people otherwise don't quite have that, sort of ticket to the next step that they're gonna need to be successful. So they're generally choosing this as seniors, as part of their post-secondary planning.
So are they participating as graduates, or do they participate prior to their high school graduation?
This is like the 5th year of high school.
So you're not graduating them?
No.
Okay.
They've otherwise met all the requirements, but
Okay.
they are not graduating.
I think this is fantastic. Thank you so much. I know you're gonna have great success.
To that point, Dr. Brophy, I believe they already are. But I'm really excited to see what will happen once we move out of the pandemic, because the adults in those facilities working with those children are really excited about this work. And the students are just so committed to finding a pathway forward. So I think we're aligned in our thought of the hope and possibility of what is on.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we do have some cards. These are all from people who would like to express their support but do not wish to speak. We have Carlin Jacobs from New Orleans Career Center, Stacy Martin from Collegiate Academies, David Shepard with Youth Force NOLA, Candace Robertson with NOLA Public Schools, and Philip Rollins with Next Level NOLA. With that, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any objections to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, please.
Item 4.5, consideration of an update report regarding the addition of dual enrollment psychology to the TOPS weighted GPA grid.
The recommendation is receive. Okay, can we get a motion to receive, please? Ms. Voce, second by Ms. Lawrence-Jones. Do we have a presentation on this?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
So according to our information here, you approved AP Psychology in December of 1920 for the extra weight in the TOPS University course requirements. We approved this at the joint BESE meeting, BESE Board of Regents meeting in December. And this recommendation is to ask both boards to approve the addition of dual enrollment psychology as part of the additional weight. We sent out this information, the dual enrollment psychology information, to our campus representatives across the state, and all received an affirmative response that this would be a good idea for us to do. So the Louisiana Department of Education and Board of Regents staff request that the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education Board and the Board of Regents approve dual enrollment psychology for the weighted GPA allowance under TOPS starting in fall 2022 and beyond.
So we had a motion on the floor to approve. Oh, okay.
Do we need a motion?
Do we need to vote on the motion to receive before we get a motion to approve? No opposition. Okay, we need a motion to approve. Ms. Bochay, Ms. Lawrence-Jones. And do we have any questions or comments from any of the board members? Seeing none, let's move to the motion. Do we have any objection to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item.
Thank you.
Item 4.6, consideration of an update report regarding teacher recruitment, recovery, and retention.
Can we get a motion to receive? Ms. Davis? Ms. Ellis? Superintendent, another exciting topic.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. We are excited to bring this update to you all today. We shared some of this information with our board yesterday just during various points of conversation. First, I would open just by stating that we feel like we had a really strong legislative session around the teacher workforce, both from a recruitment standpoint, from the retention side, but also the ability to attract non-traditional individuals into the classroom. And so we still have a long way to go, but I do think we had a strong legislative session. And at this point, I believe between Dr. Craig and Ms. Cooper, we're going to have a presentation.
So the Teacher Recruitment, Retention, and Recovery Task Force has been meeting over the last year, and one of the major recommendations of that task force is that we would set up an opportunity for teachers across the state to actually participate in two things. The first thing would be listening sessions, where we would provide teachers an opportunity to talk about their experiences, and then we will we'll talk about our survey across the state. So the department, the Board of Regents, along with Region 14 Comprehensive Center, develop protocols for these listening sessions to gather some qualitative feedback on the experience of teachers in the classroom. Stakeholders for these listening sessions were teachers, support staff, principals, district's central office staff, superintendents, student teachers, our teacher residents, our teacher preparation providers were included in these listening sessions, as well as parents and guardians of students. In addition, thank you. You and I are fighting over who's here. You take the clicker. So these are some sample questions that we've provided for you, and as you can see, these listening sessions were intended to provide an opportunity to recognize the teacher voice regarding their experiences on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. The Region 14 Comprehensive Center is currently conducting, we are in the midst of these listening sessions, and we should be wrapping these up in early July, and we'll be presenting this information to the task force at our August meeting. Em?
In addition, the Comprehensive Center also created a survey to send to teachers across the state in a similar way with the focus groups to collect their feedback, their opinions, their beliefs about the profession. We released this survey several weeks ago and actually closed it last week, and the number of respondents has increased by 1,000 since we submitted these slides a few days ago. So we've got about 5,700 or 5,800 respondents to the survey, which is outstanding. The questions in the survey were similar to the focus groups, but really covered a more broad range of topics and would allow us to look at the data in different ways. So we asked questions about why they think teachers they know that have left the profession have left, what are the main reasons that they stay in the workforce, how satisfied are they being a teacher at their school, and then how they feel supported from their school leadership. And so the survey closed last week with the results of this survey and then the results of the focus groups. We'll share that full report in August with the task force and then with BESE and you all after that. The thing that is the most helpful for Board of Regents and LDOE from the survey, the focus groups, is some of the 28 recommendations that were made by the task force really depend on the results that we get from the survey and focus groups. So that data will help drive the strategy and decisions that we make to implement those recommendations. So for example, we have a recommendation around improving working conditions in schools. Well, in order for us to know the strategy or decisions around that, we have to listen to our educators across the state. And so again, the data from the focus groups and the survey will help drive those decisions. The next set of information that we wanted to share with you in regards to updates, I'll have Ethan come and share some key bills during the legislative session that align directly to the recommendations of the task force.
Good morning, members. Ethan Malawson, Louisiana Department of Education. So like Dr. Brumley had mentioned, we did have a very successful legislative session. On top of the many education bills that were filed,
there was definitely a focus on the teacher shortage that we are having in Louisiana. So I wanted to bring up a few bills of interest that I thought would be good to share with you on some of the non-retirement bills that were considered this session. One of which, of course, was the teacher pay raises that BESE included in the MFP and that the legislature passed, which added an additional $1,500 to certified teachers and I believe $750 for our staff. That was House Bill 1, and of course that's the appropriation budget. The next was the Go Teach Fund, which was carried by Representative Thompson. And this bill created an opportunity for a scholarship program for students interested in going through to a teaching program. This also included alternative certification programs. The legislature believed in this so much that they created the fund and they also put $5 million into it, which we had not requested at the time. So the legislature went the extra mile of putting money in so this can start immediately upon the governor's signature. That's going to be working through LOSPA. The next is some changes to the Praxis core. So in the discussions with the retention and recruitment task force, there was discussions about barriers to entry into a teacher preparation program. We found that the Praxis core, which is the English proficiency portion of the Praxis, it's Praxis 1, was creating a barrier to entry into a teacher program. So this piece of legislation removed that barrier to entry and then also removed it from certification purposes. So just to clarify, you still have to take the Praxis, that's the pedagogy and also the content portion of the Praxis, but we removed that Praxis core, which is the gatekeeper into a teacher prep program. So we're hoping with this that this will actually increase our candidates or teachers that can actually go through programs and exit on time with and pass the different parts of the Praxis. And then the last one that I want to talk about, that a non-retirement bill, was the teacher certification bill. So this bill changed created an alternative way to teacher certification. So if you graduate from an institution with a master's degree, you are able to apply for a position within a school system to be an educator. Each year, you would have to be rehired. And you would have to hold an evaluation. That evaluation would have to be highly effective in that range. After 5 years of getting this highly effective rating, you would then be allowed, or you would be offered certification as a teacher in the state of Louisiana. This had broad support as it was moving through the legislature. It was a really strong push by the legislative leadership around that to create another opportunity, because we believe that opening up more pathways when you have a workforce issue is so important to be able to fill the needs that we have. And then, of course, we heard a lot about rehire bills in the legislature. So I listed all of the ones that were filed this session. I'll let you know that all of them except the final one, Senate Bill 434 by Chairman Fields, have failed. So one made it through. It was Senator Fields' bill. This reinstated the critical shortage component of retirement law, which will allow a retired educator to come back into the school system if there is deemed a critical shortage. So these are in the areas of math, science, English, and special education. And they would be able to come back without any reduction to their benefit as long as the school system has certified that. The law went another step further and also allowed this for higher education for post-secondary institutions as well, which is something we hadn't seen before. So that concludes my discussion of the legislative session when it came to teacher workforce. There were a lot of other bills that I'm happy to discuss with you outside if you'd like, that talk about just the teacher engagement within the systems as well.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments from board members on this issue? Hearing none, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have any objections to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item. Okay, before we conclude, if I could, I'd like to thank the Board of Regents for joining us today. This really, I think everybody agrees, maybe it doesn't even need to be said. the cooperation that this generates between our two bodies and the interlocking issues that we address together, I think it's fantastic. So I really do appreciate you all joining us on these meetings. Thank you very much.
We will turn the room around for the BESE meeting, and that should begin in approximately